What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Do your brakes suck? Are they squishy, mushy? Maybe you got some fork oil in your brake pads, or maybe your brakes work great and you want them to work even better. Luckily, today's video is all about super trick brakes thanks to Ride Engineering and their billet caliper. You can get one of these for just about any bike. Today we're going to be installing it on this 2003 KX250 that I'm wrapping up for a customer. And don't worry, I will do a full reveal video on this bike as well, just like I do all the other completed builds. At any rate, in today's video, we're going to introduce and install the Ride Engineering Billet Brake Caliper. It will also be accompanied by one of Ride Engineering's stainless steel braided brake lines and one of their brake line clamps. Not only that, but this particular bike is going to be receiving modern CR style brake line routing rather than the long line that goes all the way down the front of the fork, under the fork lug, and then into the caliper. So that'll be another cool upgrade you guys can do if you are on an older Kawasaki like this, up to 2003, up to 2003 Suzuki, up to 2004 Yamaha, bikes like that that had the really old long brake line. So let's go ahead and jump into the Ride Engineering Billet Caliper. We'll talk about what it is, why you might want one, why you might need one, and then when we're done with that, I'll introduce all the tools you need to do this job as well. We'll get this sucker installed, we'll get the front brakes bled together, and then you will know how to do this from top to bottom. All right, guys, here we are on the bench with the Ride Engineering Billet Caliper and the stock caliper off this bike that was prepped just in case this didn't happen, but it did, as you can see. So first things first, construction. Billet, as we've mentioned here, and this is cast. Now, this is just the standard issue stuff. Nothing wrong with it. Works well enough, but if you want insane bite or better brakes in general, you're going to want to go to something like this. One of the main reasons this caliper offers such incredible bite over cast is because the billet doesn't flex as much. So when you pull your front brake lever in and the caliper pistons are pushing outward onto your pads and therefore biting your brake rotor, you do get a little bit more flexion in this part. I know it's hard to imagine that something so hard made of an alloy or a metal could flex, but they do. And so that's one thing that goes away up to 80%, they say, with a billet caliper. So that's the first reason you're going to have massive pucker power with a billet caliper over a stock unit. Now, another reason why you're going to have increased braking power, as you can see on this amazing billet work of art, all the vent holes in the back there, this is going to allow air to pass through, obviously, offering greater cooling, where the stock caliper is fully encapsulated just like anything else, and does not offer that. So that's another upgrade. Now, weight-wise, I'm not feeling any penalties here. Of course, my hands aren't scales, but you don't want to be adding weight to your bike. And the only thing you're going to need to install this is the caliper hanger off of your bike. Here's ours here, so it's just going to use the stock cast unit. Now, when I'm doing these customer bike builds, I am proactive in the way that I am zinc plating everything. So all the steel in the entire bike is redone. This would be an example of that. What was nice was this caliper also came with some things I would have plated, such as this main pin here and the bleeder. I didn't expect the Ride Engineering caliper to come with those parts. I was ready to swap them over. Like I said, I zinc plated everything. So I'll go ahead and set these aside for now and show you a few more accessories that are going to be on this bike. Now, I mentioned earlier we're going to be installing one of Ride Engineering's braided brake lines, and this is it right here. I know it's hard to get the whole thing in one shot. Basically, with a stainless steel brake line, this is also going to upgrade the stopping power of your bike because due to the construction being stainless steel, you're not able to swell or expand under pressure or heat like a stock nylon brake line does. So this is yet another level up in the braking department here. Now, in addition to these items I've already shown you, you can actually go even crazier. So at the end of this video, I'm going to share with you guys one more thing you can add to this package to make it absolutely ridiculous, like stoppies whenever you want kind of braking power. Now, the Ride Engineering front brake line also requires, at least in this case, because we're upgrading that routing type to a Honda style, a front brake line clamp here. So this is designed to bite the stainless steel line just right on this particular setup. So, all right, guys, that pretty much explains what it is, what you're going to get out of it. Let's go ahead and jump into the tools and the install on the bike. All right, here we are in the lab. We've got all the parts we just talked about on the bench, and then we have a few basic tools here. I also want to go over the things you're not going to get and where they go. So if you guys are doing this mod and you're pulling your caliper off your bike and using your old hanger, you probably won't need to do this step, but if you take everything apart and clean it up, you will. Or if you're in my position with a build, you will be doing this. So We've got our secondary pin here that goes onto the caliper bracket. That's going to require a little bit of a thread locker here. I like to use stuck nuts around the shop. Then we've got these. These are the brake pad retainers. These are actually just the stock units. Vapor blasted them. They're stainless, so they can handle that and not corrode super rapidly. Some bikes, these are tough to find, so if you can clean yours up, great. We've also got our little dust boot that's going to get installed into the caliper hanger as well. On the topic of installing parts into the hanger, we're going to need a 12mm socket or open end wrench for that. I've got those laid out over here. Usually opt for the socket. Then we're going to go ahead and install our brake pads. Great time to do new ones. If you're doing such an upgrade, you might as well give yourself the best head start you can. So that's going to require a 5mm Allen socket so we can install this brake pad retaining pin, and then a flathead screwdriver. Some bikes have this little button that goes into the end of the caliper here. Where is that at? That threaded hole right there at the bottom. Also, some bikes are going to have an 8mm hex or bolt head style on the end of the retaining pin here, and you won't have this little flathead button. Another thing that is not on the bench right now, we're going to need a drill and some drill bits to mark a location for the Ride Engineering brake line clamp, so we can go ahead and drill that out once we figure out where the line is going on the bike. Get our final location. A few more Allen head sockets. That looks like a number 3 to me, and this looks like an 8mm nut as well. So those are not on the bench as mentioned. Now, when you're doing a brake job, it's nice to have a pneumatic bleeder. I understand a lot of people aren't going to have this. There are hand pump style, like a Mighty Vac. You can get those just about anywhere. Save you a lot of time. I hooked that one up to my air compressor. Sucks the brake fluid through. Just about a done deal. And then, of course, got some contact cleaner around. You can use this in place of brake cleaner. It will do the same thing. Some rags. Sometimes brake fluid can be a little bit messy. And you think if you're doing a brake job, you would have some brake fluid on the bench. I don't have the brake fluid out. You're going to need some. Let me go get that. All right, there we go. A little bit of Maxima, .4. This is what you need in your dirt bike, not .3. Now, some final items that you're going to need when you're taking your brakes apart. You're definitely going to need to make sure you have some brand new crush washers for your banjo bolt. And as far as tools go, this is a 14mm socket. Some bikes are going to have a 12. Some bikes are going to have an Allen head type, usually a number 6. And I think that just about covers it. So if something pops out as we go, I'll mention it. This should be it, but every once in a while I make a mistake, so I'll keep an eye on it for you guys. One last thing you might need if you're not doing this like me, where everything's dry, I have no brakes on the bike, there's no fluid in any lines, etc. If you're putting one of these calipers on your motorcycle and you need to crack your old brake line off, or even just take your old caliper off, right? You're gonna have oil coming out. So some type of drain pan to catch oil, which I do not have out here because I do not currently need. You will need that. Oh, almost burned you guys already. Some Sil Glide. This is going to be going on the slider pins, 2 of them, to keep everything working properly and free from binding when your bike is in operation. Now let's go ahead and get everything installed. The first step is going to be to get the caliper hanger, caliper bracket, however you like to refer to it, mounted onto the caliper itself. So if you guys just pulled your stock unit off, it was already built, your pin was in it, you'll know exactly what to do. If not, there are a couple steps in our case where we need to install the sliding pin and the little dust boot. Now, if you're wondering which side your pin is going to go onto, you can easily take your caliper, which has a pin in it already, and a pre-installed dust boot here below, and figure out, we know that this is going to go into that pin, and then that will tell you right there that your pin needs to install in this hole here and go down into this dust boot on the caliper. So we will set this aside. We will get our freshly zinced slider pin. We will hit that with a little bit of Stuck Nuts thread locker. Just a little dab on there. I like to use red in this case, especially with brakes. Things get hot. Thread that bad boy in there, like so. Get your 12mm socket, your ratchet, or your box end, whatever you got. Just give it a little bump, no big deal. So that's what that looks like when you're all done. Now we need to install the dust boot here, and that's going to keep elements out of the other pin that is pre-installed in the caliper. This guy has a little lip right there on the end. That's actually going to go into the hanger and flare back open. So that's kind of what keeps it in place, and that is going to install just like that. Next thing I like to do, take some of that Sil Glide or that lubricant, and I will just shoot a little bead into that dust boot. So just take my tube, get it started, and then launch some of that right into that boot there. Then you can take your caliper with the pin and sort of install them on one another misaligned and rotate it on the way in. That just gets all that grease spread out inside that bore there. Then go ahead and get a little bit of that grease on your finger and just smear it around on that lower pin. You don't need a ton of it. I'm going to go ahead and shoot just a small amount in there. Wipe off the excess there. Now before we go ahead and install the hanger onto the caliper, we're going to be blocking access to installing these brake pad retainers. So let's go ahead and clip that one on now. One's going to go on the bottom. It is the skinny one. The skinny one always goes on the inside of the caliper, and that little clip in the center is going to snap into the caliper. So you really can't put it on the wrong way. Got our little clip in the back, snap it on, it's good to go. Same thing up top. We've got another one of those little steel pads. Drop it into your caliper hanger. If the sucker wants to fall out when you flip it over, you can squeeze the little tangs on the side just a little bit and get them to grab back onto that bracket with ease. This one's just about right. Now you can take your caliper and go ahead, get your pins lined up, and get everything jiving together. The top one, as you can see, is a little bit longer. You can start it first as a guide, rotate towards the second one, and then weasel that sucker in there. Now one thing, you can see there's a little air stuck in there. Kind of rebounds. You can get a pick if you want, or you can use your fingernail and lift the edge of the rubber on these dust seals or dust boots, and then you can push these down like so. That'll let the air come out. There's also on the end of these pins a little groove, and it's going to allow the dust boot to jump over the shoulder and lock into that groove. So looks like our problem actually already solved itself, but there's a tip if you have some air stuck in there. That is looking good. Ride Engineering does have other colors if you do not like the brown. This is actually a pretty badass color and perfect for the Kawasaki build. If you got any Sil Glide all over any parts like I did, I got a little dab here on the caliper. Just make sure you stay clean as you go. Now you especially want your hands clean for the next step. We're going to put the brake pads in. And as you guys know, if you get anything on your brake pads, you're pretty much screwed. You're cooking the job straight away. So make sure your hands are super, super clean. Now we're going to go ahead and grab our brake pads. Obviously tell the side with the media is going to face the rotor. So this little guy up here, this little shoe fits right into that metal bracket we just put in. And then you can tell on the bottom there's going to be an eyelet, and that's where that pin passes through the entire unit and holds the bottom of the brake pad so they don't fall out. So one more little shoe into the metal pad, and then we're going to have a little bit of spring pressure down here. Now we can put our retaining pin through this sucker and lock it all together. Now you can put a little bit of lubricant on this too if you'd like. I tend not to. It's pretty slick, it's nice and fresh. You're going to have to push your pads up, push the pin in at the same time that you are pushing your pads up. Go ahead and grab my 5mm and start threading that through. Now this does feel a little snug because we have some thread locker on there, but on that note, if you feel anything goofy, just stop and check it out. You don't want to force anything. This is going to get to a point where it bottoms out, and we can go ahead and put our little cap in there. I guess it just kind of keeps dirt out. I can't really see a function for it otherwise. And not too much, just a hand snug, we're done. So you guys can see the little retainer there, and you got the pads, and then you got the pin. Like I mentioned, that retainer sort of moves out of the way, and the pin holds the pads from falling out. So this sucker's pretty much ready. Last step, go ahead and take your little cap, stick it into that pad retaining pin hole. There'll be just enough threads left in there. Normally these are black, so you guys can see this one's been zinced. It looks kind of cool. It's just different. People won't know why it's different, but there's even a little bit of thread locker in there that might help. Just some leftover that kind of came off that pin. Help keep that in place. That's a looker. Now we can mount this sucker on the bike. Dang! Like the bike wasn't cool enough already. This thing is so stinking trick looking. And I'm gonna start using a blanket statement because I didn't tell you about the 10mm socket. Assorted sockets. Keep assorted sockets. So we'll slide this guy right over the rotor. Get those bolt holes lined up. I'm just gonna temporarily hang the top one for now. That way I can get a little bit of thread locker. Again, we're gonna use some red. Get that bad boy stitched up in there. Same thing for the top. Back in your spot. Man, that is looking pretty stinking juicy. Torque on these somewhere in the 15 foot-pounds range. Got my hand chronometer going pretty hardcore right now. I'm not worried about it with that red Loctite. My lord. I want one of those. Freaking A. I'm loving the black lowers. That anodizing on the caliper. That brown looks so freaking good with this bike. All right, now it's time to go ahead and thread this brake line through the Kawasaki's brake line guide here, figure out how it's going to mount, then we can get a location for this bad boy here on the fork guard. We want to go ahead and make sure the line isn't going diagonal up the front of the bike if we can help it. So that's what this step is all about, mounting the brake line first. Also, one end, you got a barb that has a bit of an angle on this bike. That's going to go on the caliper, sort of kicks it off the caliper before it makes its way up. And up above on the Kawasaki master cylinder, if that's what you're using, then you just have a straight barb there. Easy stuff, just fish it through that guide there, all the way in, loop this inside of the fork leg, and then I'll meet you guys back down at the caliper again. Okay, we're down here on the end of the brake line. We need to hook this sucker up to the caliper. You're going to want to grab your banjo bolt, one of your brand new copper crush washers. Once that's on, you go through the back of the line there, add yourself another copper crush washer, and then thread that guy into the caliper itself. You guys can see the line is being kicked away from the caliper via the slight angle. And something I'm noticing right now, as you tighten this, normally the barb will rotate with the bolt as it's tightened. And on the stock caliper, you actually have like a stop where this would roll and stop, and it would keep it from over rotating. So that's something you're going to want to keep an eye on here. I'm going to go just past the bleeder. That way I have access to it when we are bleeding the brakes, but this caliper does not have a stop, so they've removed some, I guess, unnecessary material there. Bust out the 14. Again, I'm going to see if I can hold this sucker. Oh, it's not really moving at all. That's cool. Finger pressure. Their torque is 15 foot-pounds. If you're using a steel bolt, I think it's in the low 20s per the manual, so follow your manual if you're unsure. All right, up here at the top, got our banjo bolt stashed already. Get that sucker out. Same drill, crush washer. Bring that line this way. Put the banjo through the line, crush washer, thread it in. Now you guys can see there are some stops in the casting of the master cylinder up top. It's not quite the same, but it's similar to what was missing down below. Basically, as this tightens and rotates, it's going to take the line with it. And down on the caliper normally, there's a stopping point when you do that. So that's kind of what I was trying to portray. Easy money. Give that thing a little tug, and we're good. All right, here we are down at the fork guard, and we've got a sloppy, loose brake line here. We need to go ahead and get that sucker stationary with the Ride Engineering brake line clamp. One thing I just did was I actually rotated that banjo bolt below, tightened just a little bit more, and got this line to swing over just a little bit more. It's going to help us arc away from the gold-coated fork lower on the inside of this fork guard here, and give us a little bit more clearance as this thing swoops out. So that got it a little bit further away from the gold coating, is all I'm really trying to say. So I've kind of decided on a mounting point right about there that gives me a nice swoop around the back of the fork leg. It gives me a good trajectory as I'm going up and gets us lined up nicely with the upper guide. And so I also think I'm going to be able to clear the P on the Dunlop logo here. And I'm thinking something like that is going to do the trick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the top of the clamp here because it's nice and thin to mark my holes rather than try and force a Sharpie through the thickness of that backer. It's just not going to happen. So I'll go ahead and line my clamp up there. Like I said, this is nice and thin. Oh, that wasn't on the tool list. Burned you guys. Give myself a little Sharpie dot there. This is a new Sharpie, so I can be very precise. Now I've got a couple of dots right here, some Sharpie dots. I'm going to drill those, and this bike is freaking beautiful. Holy crap. Go ahead and get this thing pointed in such a way that I can drill this. I'm using a 2mm bit as a pilot, and then we'll move to the 5. It's a measure twice, cut once kind of deal. I know what you're thinking. I'm brave. You're right, I am. My bit's a little wonky. It's a little wobbly there. One more time. There we go. Got our last pilot hole. Now we'll move on to the 5mm bit. This 5mm bit is the same size as the bolt, so just take your time. Una mas. And a little clean out. Now you guys know for sure these are getting some thread locker. So we've got our brake line. Go ahead and get that sandwiched between our new clamp. These are going to enter from the back side of the fork guard so that there is a button head on the back there, so it won't damage anything. And then, uh-oh, looks like that hole on the backer is smaller than the hardware. Got a 5mm hole in the front and something smaller in the back. So I'm gonna go ahead and drill that real quick. Oh, I didn't even realize this wasn't billet. The front piece is billet. This is like nylon. I still don't recommend drilling it this way. This is pretty dangerous, but we're on the fly now, baby. So the problem should be solved now. Man, billet is so stinking light. I had no idea that the backer wasn't billet. So learn something new every day. Problem solved. Get that lower one installed as well. This is a pretty slick idea because at first I was wondering how in the heck are they going to get this thing clamped. This fork usually has a guide ring that goes here, and then this big window that comes off of that this can go through. And so this is a pretty clever fix. 8mm on the front. And I'm only going to take these until they bite the plastic, because past that, the bolt heads on the rear are going to start to impression their way through the plastic, and we don't want that. So the 3mm, I don't even need to use it. Nice bite there. I actually got my glove stuck in there. Back that one off. Sucker bit me. All right, we'll let the thread locker do the rest. All right, so the next step in this process would be to use the supplied zip tie to keep the sheath over the brake cable or brake line from moving. As you can see, got some adjustability here. That will run it up the brake line itself. You can also bend this, so when you're all said and done, you can go ahead and shape this the way you like, so it has a natural arc up the front of the bike. I'm going to go ahead and use some safety wire. That's going to put it more in tune with some of the other touches on this machine here, fuel line, etc. Maybe the radiator hoses underneath, just a little bit more factory looking. So that's what the zip tie is for. Give her a twist, give her a snip, and give her a little fold. All right, we are dialed in. Brake caliper is installed. It looks insane. We've got a nice loop on that brake line coming up around the lower fork there. Our clamp is installed. We've got some safety wire on there. Everything as it moves up the fork leg here looks great. I've already shaped this to a shape that I like, just a nice arc as it goes up. Next step for us, we're going to go ahead and fill that master cylinder with fluid and start the bleeding process. Let's go ahead and get the lid off this bad boy. Everything's still kind of loose since we weren't doing final assembly yet, and we're free. Got a rubber dust boot in there. Get some fresh .4 in there. Keep a rag handy just in case. Go ahead and pour some of that in. If you need to adjust your master cylinder so that it's level with the floor, so that you can get the maximum amount of brake fluid in there, go ahead and do so. We're going to go from nada to a bunch of pucker power. All right, we're down here at the bleeder. We've got our 8mm. We're going to start sucking fluid through this thing. I'm noticing also that Ride Engineering puts a little bit of maybe a Teflon tape on the threads of the bleeder, so that's cool. Help in the event of an air leak. So I like to get that wrench on there, postured somewhat upward, since that's where it's going to be when it gets tightened. See if I can give you guys a better view of that. And then I have the end of the pneumatic bleeder. Just pull the trigger and it just starts sucking fluid. These are amazing. So I'm going to plug that on there. I like to hold it in parallel with the wrench, crack it, start the procedure. You're going to want to check the fluid often because this thing sucks fluid through so fast. If you suck air into the master cylinder above, you're basically starting the whole process from scratch. Open it, close it. All right, I just went through some fluid in the resi. We'll do that again. Start the suction before you open the bleeder. Open, close. Go check it. Once we start getting some fluid through the hose, you can see it come out. Then you know you are getting very close to having some pressure. So between Phillips on the master cylinder, go ahead, pump the lever a few times. You're going to start to get some feel, they call it. And this caliper is going to start pressing against the pistons and therefore the rotor. So we're up here at the master cylinder. As you are sucking fluid down, that's me pulling the lever. See the bubbles coming out? You're going to get bubbles. You won't have a nice firm lever. As you can see, we don't have anything yet. Actually, I'm starting to feel a little pressure. The more those bubbles escape, the more pressure you're going to get. Right now, we're purging all of that out. So it's a combination of pulling that lever in, working the fluid, and sucking the fluid through the brake line. So again, once the bubbles are all gone, you're going to have really, really crazy brakes. Okay, guys, so you know the procedure. You know you need to get all the air out. You know you want to get that lever feel right where you like it. And as soon as you feel you have normal brakes or nice pressure at the lever, you're pretty much done. But here are a few tips you could try if you just can't get it to bleed. First of all, make sure you don't have any air leaks. You want to make sure all the banjo bolts are tight and the bleeder is tight down below. The Teflon tape from Ride, brilliant idea. You can try that if you suspect a leak there. Now, if you can't get it to bleed and you've given up for the day, go ahead, get yourself a zip tie like this, pull the lever in, and then give the zip tie a rip like that. Leave it overnight. That will actually let air escape. Most of the time you'll come out in the morning and you will have pressure at your lever again. Now in my case, I'm already getting great feel from the lever. This thing, once you start to pull the lever in about a 1/4 inch, I get some engagement and some bite down on the disc down there. Another tip, when you put your rubber boot back in there, make sure the fluid isn't so full that when you install this, fluid comes gushing out everywhere. Now another tip, when you're in the thick of it, in the bleeding procedure, when you fill this resi up and you have fluid pretty much all the way to the top, if you take your bars and rotate them too far left or right, it's going to spill out everywhere. We don't want fluid on this, as you can see. So try and keep your bars or your wheel in a forward, straight, neutral position so that you don't spill fluid everywhere out of the master up top. And one more thing you can try, if you just aren't getting it, in addition to the zip tie trick, you can actually grab this caliper by hand and hold your wheel or your spokes or whatever you need to do, the fork lug, and it takes 2 hands, push in on this caliper. It's going to force the pistons back into the caliper, and if there's any air trapped in there, it's going to shoot it out of the line. As you guys can see, Ride actually builds this bleeder at the very, very, very top. So rather than some calipers like the stock one where this is a little bit lower or a different angle, this has the best chance of letting air out through the bleeding procedure. So just some stuff you can try. Hope it works for you if you're stuck. Only other trick I can think to prescribe is that if you're really stuck and the zip tie isn't working and you don't have an air leak and you've pushed your caliper a few times and that's not working, you can sort of give the line some love. You do have a nice raise all the way here. Some brake lines go up and come down. That's a problem. They get air trapped in them. Give this thing some love, shake some more bubbles out. Got another juncture here. It's basically a 90-degree angle going into the master cylinder. So there are places where air can get stuck. When you're doing the brake line, pull in with a zip tie overnight, turn your bars so that your bars are pointing up. In other words, turn your bars to the left, if that makes sense. How to create this scenario here, best you can, with more of a ramp rather than an air pocket trapping up and down shaped line. For me, I'm out of bubbles right about there. Through this window, I get some engagement and then I get a hard stop right there. So all the while through this lever stroke, I'm getting some bite on the rotor. This thing is dialed and ready to go. Now I can put my cap back on and a little rubber boot. This thing is ready to ride. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. That is how you install basically any brake system. Not only that, this is how you upgrade your braking system to something much better than it was before. Got the steel braided line, the billet caliper. You can actually even go crazier with this if you want to. Now, for most people, this is going to be more than enough, but if you'd like, Ride Engineering also sells a Honda front master cylinder. I believe it's due to the construction or the bore size being 11 millimeter, which is usually larger than most of the other brands. And you're going to get like right on touch. You're going to get brakes immediately. So that is the next level up from here. Although this is going to be more than enough for most people. Really cool for my man Anthony if he watches this video to get a sneak peek of his bike. Like I told you guys earlier in the video, I will do a full reveal video, a full overview, who's who, what's on it, all that sort of thing. In the meantime, again, I hope you really enjoyed today's video. You know I appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to watch these things. If you need to get a hold of the boys at Ride Engineering, you can either reach out to them directly. I will leave their contact information in the description below. You can, of course, hit up mXrevival for any of these parts as well. And if you would like a bike built, clearly, I love doing that sort of thing for you guys. Other than that, if you guys like the idea of winning over-the-top bike builds like this with cool aftermarket parts like this as well, check out the mXrevival website when you get some free time. Links for all that below as well. Guys, thank you so much for watching another mXrevival video. Drop your questions below, and until next time, shred safe, and I will see you soon.